Okay, welcome back. We'll let people start coming back to their seats here as they do. By the way, up front is where you get all the prizes, so it's not too late. Okay, this second half is a little different than the first half. And so basically what I am going to do here is throw this mic around, you ask me questions, and then we'll talk about that topic. But to give you a little bit of a sense of what that looks like, just to sort of set some expectations, I'm going to bring up one question that comes up all the time and just give you a sense of the kinds of questions and the kinds of answers maybe we'd be talking about. So a lot of times I get asked, hey, Luke, should I make native mobile apps or should I make stuff for the mobile on the web? Has anybody ever asked this question? Yes? Relevant to a few people? Okay. So basically, what about apps, right? There's well over 2 billion apps each inside of both the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. So many, many of these things. And lots of people think, hey, I should get some of that for me, right? But let's look at the reality for half a second for where things sit on native mobile apps. And unfortunately, that reality is not all that glamorous. So number one, 25% of apps are abandoned after first-time use. Someone picks it up, uses it once, and that's done. Only 34% get opened more than 11 times. So think about all the money that we spend to get people to download a native app and how much we spend to build those native apps. And, not such a great situation in terms of usage. And I'll update some of these stats because these are actually become more brutal, just a little bit more brutal. But while lots of people talk about, oh, well, but the people that are there, they spend a lot of time. Well, most of time spent gets spent in the single most used app on somebody's phone. And when you get to the top 5 apps, much less the 10 apps, as we'll see in a second, those eat up the majority of that time spent. And kind of coming back to the first point here, after the first 3 days of install, you'll likely lose almost 3/4 of the people you had. And by the time you get to 90 days, 3 months in, most people are gone. So that doesn't look too good. And then when you look in mature markets, so that is places where app stores have been around for a really long time, what you find is not a lot of people are downloading new apps now per month. The general average is people will use 25, maybe to 30 something apps per month, and that number stays stable, right? It doesn't grow to 50 apps per month or 100 apps per month. It's been in that range for many years now, between 25 or 30 so apps per month. In developing markets, though, these numbers are way higher. People are downloading lots of apps, using apps. So you definitely need to look at this on a regional basis and not just say, oh, that's what's happening in the US. So despite all of this, despite the fact that getting people to stick around in apps is kind of hard, people don't get new apps, so getting them to pick up a new app is kind of hard, lots of people still invest in mobile native applications. And why is that? Well, the biggest argument that you hear is, well, compared to the mobile web, people spend tons of time inside of native mobile applications, right? In fact, they spend 20 times more, depending on where you look. These numbers are sometimes even better. And that's attention. And in today's economy, attention is kind of gold, right? So people want this type of attention, which is why they go through the effort that it takes to build these apps, which is why they slog the way through downloads, slog the way through usage. But let's split this up a little bit. So I'll do my usual, right, and things slide out. Let's see if it works this time. Okay, it worked. I didn't know if that one was going to work. So cumulatively, we're talking about average monthly minutes per user in native mobile apps, about 187 minutes per month per user. And if you look, and this is, by the way, in the US 2017, so now we're looking at the latest and greatest numbers that ComScore published. So I mentioned that 45% number went up a little bit. Today, almost half of time spent is spent in people's most used app. Can any of you guess what that might be for some of you? No? Good. Let's leave it that way. You don't even want to think about it, honestly, right? This is like one of those things that you just don't want to face. So I spend 190 minutes a month looking at my phone, and half of that time in one app, which is, I don't feel so good right now. So half that time is spent in one app. The next 4 most used apps eat up another 55 minutes or so, because almost 80% of time now is spent in the top 5 apps. So once you get to the top 5 apps, you only got 20% of this time left. And then if you were to look at the next 6 most used apps, that's about 34 minutes. And now we're talking about 96% of time spent of all that 187 minutes, which leaves only 7.5 minutes in all the other apps. And for most of us, guess where our apps are? Are you one of the top 10 apps? Usually not, right? So we're kind of competing for this pile. And now all of a sudden, does the mobile web look so bad? What about when you consider how much of the time spent in apps is actually within embedded web browsers? You know, embedded web browser, right? When you look at a web page inside of Facebook or Twitter or something like that, right? Well, let's look at that for half a second. If you look at iOS here, you can see about 50% of the time is spent inside of the stock web browser. That's Safari on iOS. On Android, about 60% is spent in the stock browser. Nowadays, that's Chrome. Before that was Android WebKit. In other cases, it might be Samsung Internet Browser. But then, on iOS, half of web traffic comes from in-app web views on Facebook. Another 4% comes from in-app web views. So more web traffic is actually coming from within native apps than from within the browser. And roughly close here on Android as well. Around 40% is coming from views of web pages within native applications. So these like weird, any of you know what a turducken is? No? This must be a United States thing. So a turducken is a turkey that they stuff with a duck, and inside of the duck, they stuff a chicken. I think inside the chicken, they put a sausage or something, just to really blow your freaking mind. And in the sausage is, I don't know, something else. So that's a turducken. And I often refer to these like embedded web things inside of native apps as turdomkins. Because of the dom? No? Too nerdy? All right, sorry. So anyway, some of these are turdomkins. And a lot of activity happening inside of native apps that is actually web activity. So if we add this, right, there's another 40% happening from within those native apps. And now we're looking like this. So does this look so bad? Looks kind of better than before by a long shot. And then if you actually look, and again, now we're looking at US data here. While there is continuously more time spent on digital, if you look at the top 1,000 digital brands in the United States, we can see that their audiences have actually grown a lot more on mobile web than they have grown inside of native apps. Now, this is audience size, right? So the growth of, at the end of or middle of 2016 compared to 2014, 82% growth on mobile web use, but only 45% growth inside of native app use. And so you kind of flip it like this. While time spent and activity within mobile websites is much lower, audience size, and therefore the ability to grow your audience and reach, is actually much bigger on the mobile web. Is monthly unique visitors on those top 1,000 properties in the US. So putting these two things together, right, over here we've got monthly unique visitors, And over here, we've got average monthly minutes per visitor. And what you kind of take away from this is it's easier to build a large audience on the web, but when you've got engaged audiences, you're much more likely to have those inside of native app browsers. That's where things excel. And maybe an easy way, let me actually show you a personal example of this, because prior to joining Google, I had a startup, and I'll sort of show you what we saw across these things to bring some very concrete data to bear. So we had a service that was all around asking people questions, where people would vote on stuff, kind of polls. And this is the cumulative number of people that ever voted on one of our questions over like a 18 or maybe 2-year-ish period here. 2-year-ish period. So you can see here, this line is the web, and this line is native. Many, many, many more people voted on the web than actually voted inside a native app. But when you look at cumulative votes, which was our proxy for activity, you can see those few people on native contributed just tons of activity, which is the same point I was making earlier. It's easier to build large audiences on the web, but native app users spend more time. And so people will always say, it's native app versus web, right? Which one do you choose? Well, if you start to look at these things, you see that native apps are just good at richness, activity, time spent, right? Depth of experience. But the web is really good at reach, getting to more people, being more accessible. And so while many people say versus, you got to pick one, I actually think both of these things have pretty important benefits. Do you want to have a big audience? Yes. Okay, what's a great way to get a big audience? Well, through the reach of the web. Do you want really engaged people who spend lots of time and do things with your company and your brand and your product? Yes. Well, native apps are really great for that. And ultimately, I think it comes down to thinking about this strategy effectively. A while ago, we ran this study at Google around some of these app interstitial ads. And before going to the mobile site, we would throw up these kinds of blockers, right? Go get the app or go to the mobile site. You've probably seen these all over the place. And what we found was like 70% of people were just abandoning here. Huge chunk of folks were going off. And so we ran some experiments with removing this, and what we found was we had a huge jump in how many people were active on the mobile web. A lot of people got through and actually did stuff. Now, the cost of that was minus 2% native app installs. So you kind of have to know what each of those things is worth to you to make these trade-offs. In our case, we made the trade-off for this because we invested a bunch of time in the mobile web experience and gave people different opportunities to get into this later and made up for this number more so with doing different kinds of stuff than this app interstitial technique. So both things can be part of strategy. Now, a couple other things to note here. While there is a ton of time spent in smartphone apps, smartphone native apps, this is now average monthly hours per app visitor. You can see the green line is smartphones, and the gray line is tablets. And what's on the bottom here is age. So who's your audience? Do they skew younger? In which case, chances are they're all over time spent in smartphones. Do they skew older? In which case, that may not be where you're going for. In fact, there's lots of differences here. If you look at kind of the 18 to 24-year-old demo, you find 92% of them are using phones with one hand. When you go to 65 plus, almost 40% of them use a phone with two hands. So only 60% of them are using it with one hand. Again, in the 18 to 24-year-old demographic, 66% of their time spent on digital is on smartphones. Almost the exact same percent by 65 plus is spent on desktops. So, who's your audience? Who are you going after? The average hours on smartphone apps, they actually are downloading more apps than they did a year ago. where only 19% here are downloading more apps than a year ago, right? And you've got half as much time spent inside of smartphone apps for this demo than for that demo. And I think understanding your audience should be a really big part of your mobile strategy, by which you can then think about where is the best place to reach them, where is the best place to create a rich experience for them. And I think it's worth talking about this because what I often hear when people ask, what should our mobile strategy be? They ask, should we build a native app? Or should we build a website? Or should we do PWA or AMP or something? What's our mobile strategy? This is not a mobile strategy. This is a technical decision. This should stem from your strategy. What are you trying to achieve? For whom? Right? And then you could think about what of these things make sense to reach that audience. And starting here, it's like backwards. Remember the whole first talk? Technology wagging the dog? Thinking about this as your strategy when it's basically just tactics doesn't work. So what do we actually mean by strategy? There's a pharmaceutical chain in the United States called Walgreens. And what they learned, because they have like stores where you can go and get your prescriptions refilled and buy a bunch of stuff, and they have a website and they have a bunch of other things. What they learned is if they can get somebody on more than one channel, that is, somebody uses their website and goes to that store, or uses their mobile app and uses their website, that customer is 3 times more valuable than somebody that just goes into the store. 3x. Right? So from a strategic perspective, they start thinking, how can we make use of mobile to help us grow the number of customers that touch multiple points of our experience? Right? We want to use mobile to fill in the holes because remember, mobile is something that's always with you, always on, always connected. You have it with you everywhere you go, and it's connected to the entire internet of everything, if you will. So they're thinking, what can we do to use this to create a complete kind of life cycle? Because we know how to get more value, right? We kind of have that as an ambition here. So what they started doing was when you went into the store and you asked to get a prescription or get a prescription refilled, they said, hey, would you like us to text you when it's ready? And the initial stages of this program, they got 2 million people, which is about like 18% of people that they asked, to give them their SMS number. Yeah, sure, text me when it's ready. So now they have, bless you, now they have a means by which they can reach people on their mobile devices from when they were in the store. So now that they can reach them, what they did was the people who picked up their prescription and gave them an SMS, they would send them a message, say, hey, it looks like it's time to refill your prescription. Download our native app where you can just scan it and it'll be ready for you. So now they use SMS to get people to download the app. With the app, they scan the prescription. The prescription's instantly ready for them. They don't have to wait in line. When they come to the store, they have special parking spots right up front. Say, did you order this online or did you order this in the app? You get front row parking. You get to come right in. And half the people that go to the web now go to the store next. So it's this interconnected thing, right, between SMS and native apps and the website and the parking signs and the actual store and all these kinds of things. And this is an example of using mobile to look at the complete customer journey. Think about how you can meet people in a number of different ways and ultimately create both more value for you and for them. I mean, these are good things for people. Oh, I'll know when my prescription's ready. Oh, I can just quickly scan it. Oh, I get front row parking at your store. This is all not just for the benefit of the company, right, but for the benefit of their customers as well. And you can see it's a very different way of looking at mobile strategy than deciding between these things. Cool? Okay, so hopefully that gives you a flavor for types of questions and types of answers. Sound good? Okay. So now I just turn it over to you and throw this microphone places. Who wants to go? Wow, nobody? Okay, here we go. to say it's a little surprising, but fire away.
Okay, so there's a big part here where you talk about creating these experiences. So for that, we need time and budget, and management need to have a buy-in on this, etc. So what's your strategies on getting buy-in from management? And also, that's one part of the question. Second one is, what advice do you have for people who aren't as well-spoken as you to get buy-in from management?
A lot of assumptions there. But, well, let's see. One of the things that I think you can do today, could I have my slides back, please, is go and show them a chart that looks like this, right? Dear person who really cares about this thing, I would like to draw your attention to this thing. Right? That at least gets some conversations going. And this is an example of having some data or some insights that you can use to make the case. And so what happens a lot of times is what people have is opinions. And everybody has an opinion. And if nobody brings anything other than an opinion to a conversation, you just end up getting into a conversation where the person who can argue their opinion the best wins. Well-spoken, whatever you want to say. Or they get paid the most and their opinion wins. Right? So if there's nothing else to help balance that conversation, like insights or data, then opinions are what rule the day. So how do you go and get something beyond opinions and data, right? And this is where I think it boils down to being able to learn quickly and adapt quickly. I'm going to show you, I think I have this somewhere. Let me see if I got this. Okay, sometimes it takes me a second to find things, but I will find things. So the things I generally try and advise people to do is just figure out how to learn things quickly. And they don't have to be very big or complicated things, right? Even just small learnings tend to help a lot, because what happens with people who are generally in higher up positions in companies, the more time you spend growing in a company, the less time you spend actually talking to customers and the people you're making stuff for. So executives, especially senior executives, kind of become like customer insight starved. And all they know is like, this team wants that, and this team needs this resource. And it's just like a crazy, terrible way to live. And so what they really become hungry for is any level of customer insight. Anything that brings them closer to understanding what people are doing is super duper useful for them. All right? I was trying to find this picture. I'll keep looking while I go there. Let me open one more slide. So if you are the person who brings, I'll just give up for now. If you're the person who brings them those types of insights, I think you have a leverage point in those conversations that other people won't have. And like I say, it doesn't take a ton of effort, right? You can just go and commission like a third party to do some usability for like $1,000. And you can be like, hey, there's something I learned that you can, or find some stats on the internet that at least help argue a point. Just have something besides an opinion to rationalize the dialogue. Cool? Okay. Who wants the microphone next? Okay. We're going to gradually make our way back. So we'll head over there and then move to that area.
Perfect flow.
Well, yes, I agree. Very nice.
Going back to the mobile web versus native app conversation,
yeah,
I just wanted to throw something else into a mix. That's traffic acquisition. Because like when I travel, I use hotels.com. I have the hotels.com app. And every step of the way, the companies like that try to get you into the app, because then after that it will be free for them to keep you. Every time you make a booking, they won't have to pay our hosts a lot of money. What patterns or similar patterns you have seen? I mean, that's obviously a key strategy for many companies, e-commerce companies.
To acquire monies through paid channels versus if you have, well, how free is, I guess my question is, how free is the native app? You certainly pay a heck of a lot to make it and to maintain it, All right, so you're not paying a traffic acquisition cost on it, but you probably did at the beginning, and it was probably more because the failure rate of it is way higher than dropping somebody into a landing page. Trying to get somebody to download an app costs a lot. So I haven't done exact calculations for everyone, but like there probably is a little bit more of an evenness than most people assume. But I think the bottom line with all those sorts of things is we have to look at it from an outside-in perspective, right? Like look at it through the shoes of the person coming or trying to accomplish a task and try and fit into that. And it's a lot of what Bart was talking about earlier. You know, we have, or I think both Craig and Bart said the exact same point, which I'm going to make now, which is we spend all of our time talking internally. I think this, I think that. And most of our decisions get made based on what we think internally as opposed to what the actual customer experience is. And just flipping that bit and kind of using that as the starting point, whether it's from an understanding what systems are at play in the brain. That's a little heavy. For me, that's a little mentally heavy to kind of think that way. I tend to think a little bit more like Craig. Like, holy crap, I just tried to do the thing that the ad says, and look at all these things that broke. That's an easier way to approach the problem. But both things end up in the same path. And I think if you align with people's natural flows, then you will have more success than trying to think about it in these abstract terms like, the cost of acquiring a customer is smaller for us inside of this. Am I making sense or no? Maybe?
I'd say the cost of developing the app is negligible for certain companies who have scale. However,
could be. I would like to meet one of those companies.
If you you talk about Amazon, right? If you purchase something on Amazon, you open the app. You wouldn't go to Google, type, I don't know, turtle Amazon, and then click on the SEM ad. So that's what companies try to avoid.
I cannot comment on that. I don't think. I don't think I can comment on that. What I can say is when I was at Yahoo, the most searched term was Google. So, yeah. Okay, there's a question back there.
Hi. I'm in a position trying to like empower teams to be able to work with these things in the best way. How would you set up the team and the roles effectively to be able to, as I take it, both kind of iterate more user-friendly designs for mobile, but also being able to kind of see this North Star in the end. Like
yeah.
What kind of team setup have you seen?
Well, let's talk about the iteration piece first. So in general, I have three things that I kind of believe in. And first I should say there's no silver bullet on any of this stuff, right? There's no like one thing you can do and it works. But in general, what I have seen is the teams that struggle the most are the ones that have created the most distance between them and the people that they're making things for. And the way you can solve most issues in terms of team dynamics, processes, and things like that is to shove them as close to the customer and user for as long as possible as you can. And over time, that gap will open up again, and then you'll find there's things like infighting, and people don't know what the vision is, and they're strategically broken, or their processes break, and then you've got to shove them back in and pull them back. And then they gradually fade back and what have you, right? So that's kind of one thing, which is more time spent with the humans you're making things for. And that it can be measured by like quantity of hours. There's some people that have formulas for what the minimum quantity can be. It doesn't matter so much. The second thing that I have found matters is having a variety of insights. Don't just A/B test. Right? That's great, sure. You can do a bunch of A/B testing, but the wider range of insights you have available to you, the more informed you are when it comes time to make decisions. And I don't believe in data-driven decision-making. People throw that phrase around a lot because what data-driven decision-making implies is that data is making the decision for you. And A, that's a cop-out. I didn't do it. The data did it. Right? The data said to make that button big and blue and purple, so it's not my fault. But B, just listening blindly to information sort of negates the role of the human. And there is a role for the human often because there's larger strategic things. There's matters of taste. There's sort of bigger, like when Max from Booking.com was talking about, now we want to create delight. And somebody asked a wonderful question, well, how do you measure delight? Right? There's things that people need to do. So being data informed, I think, is a much stronger value proposition than being data driven. And how do you get informed? You have a variety of things that inform you. Talking to customers, seeing some metrics, looking at third-party data, whatever you can do. It just kind of raises the bar of your decision-making capability. And then the third thing that's really important is being able to be fast. And I always forget who made this quote, but somebody brought this point up that's just stuck with me, which is if you can make 2 moves for every move a chess master makes, chances are you will beat the master of chess because you get to make 2 moves for every 1 move they make. So being fast is really important. And if you bring all those things together, right, being fast, getting closer to the end user, and having multiple insights, good things happen. Now, that was all a bunch of abstract stuff. Let me show you what we did tactically. A startup I had two startups ago. And it's very much those same sorts of principles, which is what we would try to do is get stuff out as fast as possible. We would learn as much as we could from what we did, and then we just keep repeating the process. And so I'll just give you like 3 tactical things that illustrate that mode of thinking. I'm not saying you should do these 3 tactical things, but they are examples of those philosophies that I illustrated a second ago. And so, 1, the first version of the product that we build had no graphical user interface. It wasn't a mobile app, it wasn't a website, it wasn't a mobile website, it wasn't a PWA AMP mobile website, native app, interstitial, pre-built Android instant app site, right? It had no graphical user interface whatsoever. It was a command line interface. And the way you would use this command line interface is you literally went to a terminal and you would say, dear app, the app was called Bag Check. Please tell me what you could do. And you get all of these different options here, right? And then you could say, what can you do with what we called bags? This was like a set of things you could put products into. Show me what you can do with a bag. And I'd like to add an item to a bag. And what item would you like to add? I would like to add toast to a bag. So the whole first time experience was built through a command line. And we spent like at least a month using it like this. And so why did we do this? Well, what this allowed us to do is think at a higher level about what we're doing. What are the objects that are in here? What are the actions you would take on those objects? What kind of attributes do those objects have? And we didn't have to get into the details of, is it blue or is it red? The other thing that we did by creating this command line interface is we built everything as an API up front. So then later, it was so much faster to go build a website or a native app or a Alexa voice actions app or a VR, whatever, right? Because everything is already encapsulated as an API. So this allows you to move really quickly, but where most people start when they build something is they make mock-ups, right? Okay, here's my picture. And then what do you start talking about? I don't like blue. Could you make the logo bigger over here? Are those really the right conversations to be having at such a early stage of the project? Probably not. So you waste tons of time on that you could be spent talking about much more important things like what the hell is in here? How does it work? How are these things related? So that's kind of one thing. And again, this is all about kind of being fast and learning. The other thing that we made, and nowadays this is kind of, I think, a little bit more prevalent, but we made this very strong separation between what happens in the front end and the back end by using what's known as logicless templates. And so what that meant very tactically is I, as a designer, just had a text file on my computer where I could go and change data. So if I wanted to see what this page looks like with a shorter title and a different image, I just change this little text file and it updates. So I could see what real data looks like, right? It was a way to get closer to what reality is. And then the really nice thing about this is I was using the structure that the backend system used here to do the design work. And when I uploaded any changes I made to the front end, it just worked because all of this fake data just got changed with real data. Right, so it enabled a very fast and iterative design process. And it got you closer to what reality is. But this is the one that got us the most close. So what we made was this admin queue, at least we call it the admin queue, that would show you right now on the app who is live and what are they doing. So you could sort of see, this is how it looked. You scroll through, you see all the people that are currently live on the site. Here's Harry Potter. And you can see he clicked on that. He did this search for Apple TV. He picked something. He saved it. That took him like 35 seconds. Then he did a search for Airport Express. Looks like he found that item quickly because he selected and saved it really quickly. Right? And it's like, look, this dude is just cruising. First, he searched for iPhone 5. Oh, he failed there because then he went to iPhone. Okay, we should probably fix that. Right? Right there, we found an issue. And we can go and adjust it. And in fact, this thing was so addictive because the other thing that you could do is any point in time you could click on one of these links and then instead of seeing the service as yourself, you would see it as that person saw it. Right? We would kind of display the UI to you as if you were that user. And do you see how I had to write admin all over the background? I had to put this on here because people started to get a little confused where they logged in as themselves or seeing it as somebody else. Right? So we had to put this garish kind of background in issue. But it was super amazing to view the world through your customer's eyes at any given moment based on what their real-time activity was. And it allowed us to do this thing that I still love today, what I call pre-emptive customer service. So what we would do is because people would put their like Twitter handles when they signed in, and if we notice a problem, this is my CTO sending this guy note, says, hey, we saw you just hit a bug. I just fixed it. Sorry. And people would be like, what the hell? But in a delightful way. Because I always hear like, oh, doesn't this freak people out? Nobody was ever like, what are you doing? They were all like, wow, thank you, right? I didn't even know. Before they could even go and file the bug, we would go and fix it, address it for them. And again, I don't mean any of these things are like, you must do it this way, but they do encompass the spirit of what I was talking about to help teams work like this, right? Get closer to the customer by viewing the world as them, seeing what they're doing in real time, putting in real data, move faster through a lot of these different techniques. And the more you can kind of learn quickly and get closer to what's ultimately happening on the other side, I think the more good things start to happen for you and your teams. Okay, I see a hand over here. Anyone on the way down? Okay, we'll hit the man in the middle and then come down here. Here it goes. All right, this is going to be precarious. Oh! Oh! Decimated. Hey.
Fixed, maybe?
Yeah.
Might be a little too operational, but push messages is obviously the big allure of native apps. Oh, now we have it in the pocket and we can always send shit. But that is usually what happens. So do you have any reflections and advice on how to actually drive that process? How do we get a process? Because usually the tech and online guys, they're very into the details. And marketing just have the messages. There's sort of a gap in between. How do you control this medium and get the most of it, right?
Yeah. Push messaging. Okay, I'm trying to think what I can say. Number one, many attempts to start to use push notifications will show short-term gains. And a lot of people get fooled by those short-term gains and assume that they are long-term gains. And what you generally find is when you introduce a new push notification, you'll get a little bit of a spike in daily active users. But if you look at it longer term, that spike starts to fade out and you don't get the return that you thought you were going to get at the beginning. So point one is to be sure that you also look longer term at the cumulative effects of those things and not just in those initial kind of early days. And, that means post 30 days and beyond. Number two is the appropriateness and quantity of push notifications that people are willing to endure differ per category. So if you slice and dice applications by things like communications, retail, travel, and the like, right? You'll find that things like communication apps, high tolerance for lots of messages continuously, whereas on things like a retail app, not so much. And the big distinguishing factor in general across push notifications that moves them from relevance to irrelevance is the degree to which they're personally applicable to people, right? That's why the communications ones you tolerate so much, because they're coming from people you know and you're actually having a conversation with them. Whereas the ones coming from a marketer that's like, sale on underwear, right? Turn this crap off. So that's kind of another important factor there. The rate of notifications and the time at which you send them can also have an impact. So that's another thing that I would kind of look at. And I had like one or two other points, but I'm forgetting them now. Hopefully that gives you enough. Don't count on them being your be-all, end-all thing, because over time you'll see the operating systems introduce more and more control to end users. Android O already does this. It like bundles notifications in the categories, and you can turn categories off right there in the notification. You just go, and there's your direct control there, right? And in the new versions of iOS, Apple's doing similar things. So both operating system owners, whatever you want to call them, are cognizant of the issues that too many notifications cause for people, and in general we're err on the side of user experience as opposed to anything else. Good? Okay. Yep, down here.
Hi, I work in a telecom company, and we kind of update our mobile application every 2 months.
Yeah.
So my question regarding to get customer feedback involved in the updating process, so that we update according to the customer, not from our internal views. Should we of course we can rely on some software tools to and statistics from the data usage for the current update or for the current version. But in the same time, we can get new people as a brainstorming session, focus group, and we give them the mobile application as, in other words, face-to-face with the customer and talk to them. How important is to get these focus groups? Should we do this every quarter or with every release? Because it entails, of course, cost and planning. This is my first part. The second part, which is close to it, about Google, for example, for Gmail. Do you guys get people focus group with customers and users and with every release, or do you do this once a year, or no, you just depend and rely on statistical softwares?
Okay, a lot of stuff there. Let me see how I can answer this. Number one, focus group, not a good word. What you generally want to do is err on the side of behavioral and observed research as opposed to reported research, right? And so very specifically what I mean there is people will tell you all kinds of things, but whether or not they actually do those things is a totally different ballgame. My friend Bob Moesta, who is a co-founder of this thing called Jobs to be Done. It's like a methodology that Clay Christensen, who wrote Disruptive Innovation, just did a book on it. But basically, the principle of jobs to be done stemmed from him doing all kinds of market research. And he would go and talk to people who were in the market for a new car, right? And he'd go and talk to these folks, and they're like, okay, what are you going to buy? What are you thinking of? And they're like, anything but a minivan. We'll probably get like an SUV. You know, we're looking at this BMW X5. We're looking at this Audi thing. And up and down all these things, no way in hell would they ever buy a minivan. 2 months later, follows up with them. What did they buy? A minivan. Right? And he's like, what the hell? You're lying to me. Right? And so he literally came down to this observation that people are just lying to him. And so he shifted his methodology. And what he does now when he does interviews with people, and I got to sit in on a bunch of these. Actually, you know what? I might be able just to show you this. This is kind of fun. Let me dig this up. So I got to sit in on a bunch of these interviews with him. And I'll just show you kind of the notes I wrote on it, on what these things are like. Here we go. Okay. Can we bring that up? Okay. So his methodology is he went and studied how police and detectives interrogate people. Because police and detectives and military need to learn the truth. Right? So what are the interrogation techniques that they use to find out what people are actually going to do and do? And so his approach is get down to a very, very detailed level of what's going on. So I just copied kind of this format he used. It's like, okay, so I was told I could talk to you about this product. We're doing some early research. We want to find out how people talk about this. And this is going to get a little weird, but what I want to do is film the documentary of how you found out about this product and how you started using it. And I'm going to ask you a lot of very detailed questions, and I really want to understand the words you use, right? And it's all about the story. So he'll go in there and say, okay, when was the first time you used it? Were you at home? Where in your home? Were you in the kitchen? Where in the kitchen? At the table? What was on the table? Was anybody else with you? Right? And there's this drill down. And the fascinating thing, and as he kind of comes in here, okay, I want to slow you down. It's going to get weird. I'm going to slow you down even more, step by step. It just gets into the tiny little details. And what you find when you do that is there's these little micro moments that actually make this huge impact between when people decide to hire and fire a service. And so he specifically looks at two types of people who started using it and are now active users, and people who used it and then fired it and stopped using it. And he does the same super detailed research technique to get down to very specifically what was happening. And what we learned when we did this on a particular Google project was we always knew having kind of a private aspect to the product was important, but we completely underestimated how important it was. And when we did these series of research techniques, we realized everything kind of broke down because people didn't feel like they had enough protection over the thing that they were doing, right? We had put in some of those features, but they were a level or two deeper, and it kind of broke the entire thing. So with these types of techniques, you can learn a lot more. It's very different than a focus group, because a focus group is a bunch of people in a room like, oh, I think I would buy a minivan. No, I would never. And this is specifically, you bought a minivan, right? When were you? What day was it? What time? How? And then you get down to what was that thing specifically? What was that language? What was that moment? What was that series of micro moments that made you do it? So this to me is behavioral research. It's kind of the most qualitative of behavioral research. Other behavioral research is looking at actual stats. What are people doing? Well, 55% of people click this button. Other behavioral research is usability studies, or what we do called RITE studies, rapid iterative testing and evaluation. And the way that works is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we design and build a prototype. Thursday, we bring people in to use it. End of day, Thursday, we talk about what we saw, make plans for what we do next, and repeat week after week after week, right? And with that kind of methodology, we can go through a whole bunch of stuff really quickly. There's a deadline every week, so people do shit. Because if you don't have deadlines, stuff won't happen. The other thing that works really, really well with that methodology is ideas are cheap. Somebody has an idea. Oh, I think we should. Okay, it's only going to cost us a week to try it out, so why not? And we'll all learn something. And this is one of the ways to accommodate people with opinions, especially hippos, highest paid people's opinions. Like, okay, we'll take the hippo, we'll try it out, come back, here's what happened, right? And maybe the hippo's got a great idea, maybe the hippo realizes that wasn't a great idea, but appreciates the fact that you listened, tried it, and told them what happened after the fact. But even those techniques that I'm talking about here are also examples of trying to get closer to the customer, right? And moving quickly, right? And trying to get different kinds of insights. It's all the same basic set of things. Oh, that's the closest pass of the day. Hello.
You had this point on web applications driving, or mobile web driving audience, and mobile applications driving engagement. And then we had to talk about the AMP, the native applications, the web views. I would like to ask you on your opinion on, from your point of view, what really is the thing that makes a mobile app? What changes the behavior from like driving audience to driving engagement? Because if I do like a web view app, it's basically just an icon in my app deck that opens a mobile web.
Yeah, I have something on this. Hold on, let me see if I can find it.
Thanks.
This is going to look ugly, but okay. Hold on, let me show you the ugly version. And some of this may have changed because it's a bit of an older slide, but hey. So what makes native different than mobile web? So in a nutshell, this is still true. You get deeper hardware access, which means access to the latest and greatest stuff. And you will always have more access to the latest and greatest stuff in proprietary platforms than you will in open, inclusive platforms, right? Though now with PWAs, we have access to notifications and putting things on the home screen and all that good stuff, offline access. Native apps had that a long time ago. And by the time the web gets that, native's got a whole bunch of new stuff, you know, augmented reality, 3D facial modeling. Going to be a long time before that makes it to open standards on web. So native always wins here and continues to. Multitasking background, right now it's still true that the browser runs as a single application and things within it in Windows can't just do stuff. So if it's important to you to kind of know where people are because you're doing something with location or you need to be collecting assets or whatever, the maturity of this here compared to this is not there yet. Although service workers doing some stuff here, but not there yet. App and in-app sales, you have this quick purchasing funnel, and most money comes from in-app sales, not from app downloads, if you look kind of holistically at the ecosystem. So that's a really big deal for a lot of people, right? This single touch payment platform that you get through being able to sell things inside of an app is key to a lot of people's revenue. And maybe payment request API will help a little bit there, but compared to the maturity of this here, not there relative to the scale. And then this one now, as I said, some of these things are changing. You can get this home screen placement over here, but again, it's not as integrated and as tied to this thing, right? So in general, these are kind of the things that on the native app side, people cite and turn to as benefits. On the mobile web side, what you get is broad access because you're not limited to any app store. Even though iOS has 1 billion devices, it only has 1 billion out of the 3.2, I think it is now, active devices, right? And even though Android has a Play Store, that's only 2 billion out of the, and some of the ones in China don't have the apps, blah, 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 right? Every single one of them has a web browser, and every single one of them has a pretty modern, good web browser. So a lot more access over here. If you want to change anything, change it on the server, done. More and more, you can do some of that in native apps, but it's still not as perfect, right? You still have to do updates for a lot of stuff. Real-time testing is the one that I think has blurred the line the most. There are now a lot of means by which you can do real-time testing inside of native apps, whereas before they were just sort of locked in binaries that couldn't really do it. Now I think this one has blurred the line a bit more. And single development platform, I don't know. Building for that many different web browsers, is that really a single development platform? Can you shove HTML inside of a native app? Yeah, you kind of can. I have a simplified version of this, which I wonder if still holds water. Let's take a look at it. This was my like simplified thing. So yeah, it kind of works. This was more around like how you can use the two things together. you build a native app to take advantage of all those capabilities that I just mentioned, right? And why do you want to do that? So that the main thing you do is faster and easier. If the main thing you do is like sell airline tickets and you have frequent flyers, right? Maybe you want to build a native app for that really lucrative, important core group. Whereas here you do this for access and stuff that, and this is generally what people are doing now, right? Stuff that's not critical, they kind of put in web views, right? Like a information page or a help page or those types of pages. They don't build as native apps. They build it once on the web and integrate it inside of native apps. So yeah, most of this holds water, I guess, even though I made it a long time ago. Things don't change that much, maybe, or they do. Okay, where else? Let's throw it over there. Nice.
Hi, so thanks for a super interesting presentation. I really like the timelines and looking back on product development. So I would like to just hear your comments and thoughts on working with strategy and product roadmaps, because we have this explosive growth in technology and diversification in technology. So at the same time, we have limitless opportunities, but limited resources. So how do we, and we need to plan ahead. So just your comments on how to work and approach product development and roadmaps.
Yeah, so do you mean that from a perspective of what's coming next, or do you mean that more tactically, like what we were talking about before earlier with processes and working styles?
More tactical approach.
Like the tactical pieces? Yeah, well, a lot of the principles I illustrated earlier hold up, right? Move quickly, get closer to the customer, try to learn as much as humanly possible. And in terms of kind of a high level structure there, let me see if I have this actually. I probably have it in the giant file that I closed that takes 30 minutes to open. This bad boy runs 843 megabytes. And it's still opening. So hopefully it loads in a minute or two. In the meantime, I'll stall. Didn't work, did it? Okay, I'll just talk. So, actually, you know what? I never answered the second part of your question, which maybe is related to it. Your second part was, how do teams at Google work and do this stuff, which may be very related to what you're doing. So things that I have observed in working there for a number of years now, which is every team is kind of empowered to work in the way that works best for them. There isn't like a single doctrine. Like some companies are like, we are all agile and everybody's going to be agile and everyone's going to have a scrum master and wear a robe and burn down charts in a meeting room once a week, right? It doesn't have that kind of unified process. All the teams are enabled to work in the way that they see fit. And I think that's a really key part of all of this stuff, is if agile works for you in your environment, great. If not, then you shouldn't force it into that bucket. So from a process perspective, I don't have like one recommended process outside of things that embody those principles, but I do have oh, please let me have this. Oh man, I don't have this. I have this awesome slide, which I can't find now. Typical of my life. But no. Okay. What I basically show is how generally there's too much isolation between the different groups that are responsible for the product development and building process, right? You have groups that kind of envision and write requirements and those kinds of things. And then there's a gap. And then there's the team that designs it based off of that. And then there's a gap. And then there's the team that builds it. But where you find the most interesting stuff happening is actually between those gaps. And so closing those gaps as much as possible helps all of these processes, right? There's magic between having designers and developers sit and work with each other. Some of the best ideas I've ever had from a design perspective have come from developers who are in the guts of the system, say, did you think about doing this way? Because, right? And then when people on the like business side or the product side are thinking through strategy and product, having somebody from the design team there to help them visualize what are they trying to say and does it even make any sense can go a huge way. So I would, in terms of a process perspective, really try to minimize those gaps and get those folks working together. To answer some of the question around what's next, I don't know if you actually asked that, but I'll just show some slides I like. Because I can, right? I kind of been watching some of this stuff. Right? This used to be the Google TV UI, and now it's just a little stick you plug in the back of your TV. This is an entire computer system on a single chip. I don't know if you've seen some of the stuff that has come out from the teardowns of some of the new devices that are making, but they're like tiny, tiny little things, right? This is what a Chromebook now looks like. Right? That's an Asus Chromebook and this little stick. We talked about this one here. And so there's just this ongoing thing where what used to be a personal computer, right? Both these things cost about $1,000. This thing actually has more pixels, believe it or not. They got the same amount of storage. This thing is faster than that. This thing has more battery life than that. And this is the one that really got me recently. This is the original iPhone. This is 10 years later, right? And it does more. And it's thinner. Right? It basically has the same pixels, same capacity, little thinner, more battery life, but look at all the stuff that it does. So there's a bit of a pattern here, which is basically all of our technology is able to fit into more stuff. So we are putting it into way more stuff. And so whereas we used to make software designed for this, today, what is the personal computer really? It's a little bit more the combination of all of these things as opposed to a single artifact that kind of sits on your desk and you come in and out of. And there's a lot of implications for working like this that we were talking about earlier, right? You can't be so monolithic. You have to be a lot more integrated. Design teams have to understand what's capable and what's not inside of these systems. And, what is the next personal computer? I'll just sort of jump through this quickly. Maybe there's just a bunch of screens, a lot of things that are creating data, and it's a little bit more of a mesh type of thing than it is a singular thing that we had before. Kind of stuff that I think about. Seems interesting to me, so I figured I should at least say it. Okay, onward. Yep, over here. Yep.
So you almost answered the question I was going to ask.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Then we're done here.
But I am going to be slightly more specific. All
right.
So, in 2007, iPhone released, and it changed the way we interact with the internet. So it was a big disruptor. What do you think? Will there be a next disruptor, or this technology will evolve in small steps and there will not be big change in how we interact with the internet?
Always is a big disruptor, isn't there? Right? Let me find this other slide. Let's see here. Okay, I think this is a good one. We'll find out in half a second. So, there's a general cycle to these things. It just always repeats itself. And my friend Tom Chi made a nice picture of it that I'm trying to find, and I will show you. Oh, come on. Aha. I don't think it's a nice picture now because it's on this weird old crappy thing. But if you generalize kind of what happens, there's a stage where something is emergent. A lot of people thinking about it. Nobody's really making any money on it yet, but something's going to happen. Think like augmented reality. Probably right here. A lot of people thinking about it, a bunch of startups, big companies trying to play in the space, whatever. But we don't know what's really going to happen there. There's a period where something is in a growth market, right? Double-digit growth, it ends in consolidation, things like this. And maybe wearables used to be over here, or let's say wearables. Let's say like smartwatches, maybe we're over here. You saw a whole bunch of players trying to figure it out. Now, Apple has become the world's largest watch seller. They passed Rolex. So probably a consolidation thing. And they're growing 50% quarter over quarter selling these things. You could argue it's here. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a couple winners. Then you get to this really mature market where people stick tightly to a brand. They migrate very slowly between brands. Search is definitely here, right? Most people pick Google as their search engine. And once you pick Google as a search engine or you pick Bing, you tend not to really move very much, right? And then what happens, there's something that goes, and that market starts to fall off a cliff. So what's in this state right now? The PC, probably, right? What was the disruptor for the PC? It's probably the smartphone, which is probably over here. Again, remember the crazy growth market? We had BlackBerry, we had Nokia, we had Windows Phone, we had iPhone, we had Android. Consolidated, what ends up happening? Two companies really kind of drive the smartphone space. Probably this will happen there. If you know what that is, all right, we'll talk afterwards and make some kind of a deal. But generally, this is the cycle that things go through. And it's important context I've found to know how to act and how to measure and how to behave, right? Because it's very bad if you are here, but you think you're over here. And it's also very bad if you are over here and you think you're over here. You do the wrong kinds of things. You measure the wrong kinds of things. And you act from there. And the other thing people say is, well, what's the future, right? Is the future augmented learning? Or augmented learning, now I'm blurring all the crap. Is it augmented reality? Is it machine learning? Is it wearables? Is it voice interfaces? Autonomous cars? The answer is yes. But the question isn't what, it's when and how. That's the hard part to figure out. Right, and those are where the billion-dollar questions sort of sit. And if I knew that, I'd probably be doing it right now. Fair? Okay. Yeah. Wow, this is nice and easy with the microphone now. I like it.
Hi. 10 minutes ago, I received an email from Lufthansa saying that I need to check in for my flight.
Yeah.
So I figure I better do it right now. And I click on it, and it seems that I cannot, it says you cannot do mobile check-in. So I request the desktop version, and it gets too complicated, I give up. I say I better listen to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the morning session put me in this creative mode. I started thinking, how can this improve?
Yeah.
Various things that we discussed in the morning came to my head, including chatbots. So chatbots, just wanted to throw them out there and see what your take on them as replacements for forms.
Do you know why you have to check in?
Tell me.
Does anybody know why you have to check in? Anybody work in the airline industry? Okay, why? No, do you work in the airline industry? Okay. Who works in the airline industry and knows why? Yes. It's about the money? What does that mean? Why is it less expensive for the airline? Because it's paperless? Okay, well, that's why you have to check in digitally. But why is there a notion of checking in? Because flights are overbooked? Okay, who else? Anybody have a different? Okay. 2 days ago, I spent 4 or 5 hours in Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam with a big group of people from KLM, Air France, Transavia, and what have you. And what I learned through that process, maybe those of you in the airline industry know differently, that's why I was trying to confirm this. They told me the only reason you have to check in is because 2 different systems are at play. There's the travel booking system, which is a system that was made that accommodates travel agency and online booking sites and all this stuff and all the systems up front that book your travel, which is totally a different system than the system that actually manages flight travel and human beings. And the reason the check-in process exists is so you can transfer the information from over here to over here. It's this weird legacy thing, right? And we did that with paper because back then you would take the paper and you would boop, and then that creates a record in the other system. So what Delta has done now in the United States, this is the first United States carrier that does it, there's no check-in. So my answer to you, right, you were like, should we use a chatbot? Should we use it? How about no check-in? And I love that you asked that question, and I just had gone through this process because the other thing that I learned when I was there for those 4 hours or so, the team at Transavia Airlines had done this really nice customer journey mapping. They went and spent a whole bunch of time with people. They go to the airport like every other week and talk to the people that are in the airport. And what they had done is they had mapped this large customer journey. And one of the things that they found was there's a ton of friction around the check-in and the get the boarding pass. And people freak out. Do I have my boarding pass? Will I get on the plane? And did I check in on time? And if I don't check in right when it says, it was just rife with issues. Right? So they identified a ton of pain points here. And they're exploring, like, how do we fix this? This is a great opportunity to kind of do this, right? Well, what would be great? How about you don't have to check in at all? It turns out it's actually possible, right? And people love it. Delta just did away with the standard antiquated flight check-in process that's plagued modern flyers for years. Now boarding passes will automatically be sent. But it's only if you use Delta's mobile app, so it's not there yet. But it hopefully gets there soon. Cool? Good answer? And the other reason I really liked your question is because it kind of started pushing us back to which technology do we use? Do we use chatbots? Do we use whatever, right? Like it's very easy to start jumping to solutions. Anybody can jump to a solution. It's much harder to understand the problem. Why is it a problem? Right? And maybe you in the airline industry know better than me, but I think it's a little bit telling that all the people had a different reason why it's a problem. Oh, it's for money. Oh, it's for security. Chances are we don't even know why it's a problem. So you spend all that time understanding the problem, and maybe it is true that it's these two different systems. You're like, oh, well, we could probably fix that, right? So spend more time understanding the problem than you do coming up with ideas. And again, this is come back to all the process questions people had. How do you work together as a team? Why don't you spend a crap load of time figuring out what the problem is you're actually trying to solve instead of, oh, I have an idea. Oh, I have an idea. I have an idea. Okay, now let's fight. Is it going to be Bob's idea or Jane's idea that we implement? Onward. Yeah, look at this. Yeah. It's nice and easy.
Hi.
Hi.
Should we treat tablet traffic like a desktop without a mouse, or like a big mobile, or like totally a separate entity?
The age-old question. I have a really nice slide for this. Will I actually find it? No, I will reveal something to you that I'll reveal to you somehow the sausage gets made. Like the day before this, I think to myself, I'm like, okay, what are the questions people have been asking me recently? I will make a deck that has answers to a lot of the questions people have been asking me recently. And then what ends up is people asking me totally different questions. And I have those buried somewhere way deep. And I sit and I wait for slides to open before I can answer it. And so it's going to take forever again. The tablet in of itself right now hasn't found a home, right? People have approached it as kind of a larger phone and as a smaller laptop. I do believe now that some of the tablet sales numbers have started recovering and there's become more of a focus on these things as more like productivity / work-ish type of devices, that maybe something will happen there. But if you look at how people use tablets today, which is what I'm trying to bring up on my slides, what you find is tablet usage sort of spikes in the morning and in particular in the evening hours, right? Because what tablets tend to get used for, and let me see if I can find the slide here, is for like couch and coffee type of scenarios. So they have, is this it? No, close. Oh, come on, you. Oh, man. Yeah, so this, if you look at where people are actually using the devices, what you find is they have these evening and morning things, and huge parts of that are reading, viewing videos, and playing games. So that if you were to build for the tablet today, those would be the kind of use cases I would optimize for and try and create interfaces that work for that. Increasingly, though, more and more these things are shifting a little bit to productivity, and it's unclear if that's going to work, but it certainly has gotten some of the sales up and running. And I don't have, well, maybe I'm getting so close, I don't have it. Or maybe I do. No, I don't have it. It's somewhere in my files. But anyway, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense. Aha! Achoo! So this is news readers, right? And you can see desktop. Generally, desktop patterns follow one simple curve throughout the day, which is people use them at work and then stop. If you look at the tablet curve, this is what I was referring to earlier, right? For news sites, you can see there's a spike in the morning, but there's a really big kind of spike at the end. This is Financial Times, so now we're looking at a specific news site. Same story of desktop. Smartphone kind of spikes in the morning. This is BBC Olympic traffic. You can see desktop, same sort of curve. Mobile pops in the evening, and tablet has a really big spike in the evening, kind of confirming what you have there. And so generally what you see is PCs have this work spike, tablets have this evening spike, mobile gets used throughout the day. Now, the question I was alluding to earlier, is the tablet spike going to sort of shift over to the desktop spike a little bit as these things start to become more work-oriented devices? I don't know. We'll see. And the reason why I bring that up is, in general, if you're trying to make things that are a little bit more work-oriented, you would design for those things a bit differently than if you were trying to make things which are like casual, evening-oriented, right? You can think about the different use cases and features there. Okay, I think I need to stop and give you a couple minutes. Is there any burning questions somebody wants to ask super duper fast? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, and I'm going to bring Scott up.